You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half of the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
How do you make decisions for your business? Most retailers would answer by saying, well, they use data or historical trends to make sure that they're meeting the needs of their customers. Of course, we all expect disruptions. However, 2020 has been the disruptor of all disruptors. A recent joint report by Foursquare and Apptopia tracked transportation trends in the U.S. using mobile app and location data. On this episode of Convenience Matters, we're going to dig a little deeper into the uncovered data on consumer foot traffic at convenience stores. How has the time of day consumers visit your stores changed? Has it changed at all? How often are consumers stopping at your stores to refuel their vehicles? Listen in and let's allow the data to tell us the story so that you can market more intelligently within this rapidly changing world. Welcome to Convenience Matters. My name is Donovan Woods with the Fuels Institute, and I'm joined today by my co-host,
Jeff Lenard with NACS, and we are welcoming our guest, Ariel Siegel-Eck. She is Director of Client Solutions, Data and Insights with Foursquare. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
And as Donovan said, Foursquare, for those who remember Foursquare as more of a consumer-facing business, what Foursquare is doing now is much more in the way of, it's less about, hey, I'm identifying myself as here, and more they're looking at trends, they're looking at data. They're really behind the scenes and less consumer facing in how they dig into data. And this recent report that Donovan alluded to has all kinds of interesting findings. And I'll start with a very, very broad, one of the key takeaways that's in the report. The first of those five key takeaways talks about transportation has changed. So can you just kind of set up, how do you look at what is going on with consumers and hit that first of those key takeaways? How has transportation changed?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you alluded to, Foursquare has evolved tremendously over the past 11 years. And today we're really the leader in location technology. And so that means we're number one at interpreting signals from a device as actual locations and not just coordinates. So we have this proprietary technology called Pilgrim, which gives us the unique ability to understand where phones are with true stop detection and multi-sensor awareness, where we're seeing over 1,500 data points per day on our first-party audience of over 25 million consumers globally. And that really enables us to track trends in consumer behavior. And particularly since this pandemic arose, we've been keeping a close eye on these different trends, and advertisers, marketers, academic researchers are looking to Foursquare to help them understand what this reset of the economy looks like. And as people are feeling that itch to get back in the real world, we're seeing the ways in which they're moving about that world have really changed. And we're able to understand that with foot traffic patterns. So in this recent report that we conducted in partnership with Apptopia, we looked at our foot traffic patterns to various different transportation locations in conjunction with app usage related to transportation. And what we're seeing is really interesting shifts where people are choosing to drive rather than taking public transit. And so we've seen really significant declines in foot traffic to places like train stations, metro stations, even bus stations. And instead, people are opting to drive, whether it's, commuting to work for those still going into the office or, just running their errands. People are really still visiting gas stations even more than before the pandemic. So that's really the first trend that we highlight in this report, is how people are choosing to drive or perhaps rideshare rather than those other forms of transportation because they're able to better socially distance in that way.
Now, I want to, Ariel, go back to Jeff really quickly, but I wanted to ask you this question just so our audience, in case they choose to find this report. The report that I have that we're talking about is called Mobility Reimagined. Is there an update to this one, or is this still the best one to find?
This is the most recent report, but we are continually updating new reports on our website as well as on Amazon Data Exchange. And so that's a great place to look for recent updates.
And one of the things Donovan had mentioned, he talked about time of day. Are you seeing a little difference in how people engage throughout the day? We know that there's less commuting in terms of mass transit. We know that there's less commuting because of people driving. So are people engaging at gas stations at different times now? Is it less around the morning and afternoon commutes, or do the commutes start a little later, end a little earlier? And those could be really, really big implications for what convenience stores might have to do if this becomes more of a long-term trend.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are able to look at those visitation trends over time, by day of week and by time of day. And we are seeing across the board, both in terms of gas stations and convenience stores, as well as across many other categories, there's really been this disruption in terms of what people's day-to-day routines look like. And people are visiting places in the physical world at different times than they used to before. So when it comes to gas stations, what we're seeing is that people are more likely to be visiting gas stations and convenience stores around the lunchtime and early afternoon, much more than compared to before the pandemic. Whereas, before we used to see typically the busiest times were around the morning and evening commute for many transportation categories. Now, as commuting becomes less common, people may be wanting to run their errands at times of the day when stores will be less busy, or they have that flexibility now that they're working from home, where they're able to run out and run their errands on a lunch break more easily. So definitely an interesting trend to keep an eye on, as I mentioned, both at gas stations as well as other retail categories.
And anecdotally, we talked to retailers, and they absolutely confirm what you just said, that breakfast is a real challenge now. That used to be the big opportunity. And they're saying that people are now starting to get their coffee more and more before they leave for the day. They're doing it at home. They're eliminating that trip. And of course, you always want to get the customer as early as you can in the morning. So that data supports what we're hearing, and that's a concern, because you want to start off the day with some sales, and that'll be a trend that we'll have to look at a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been interesting because we also keep a close eye on the dining sector and QSRs and restaurants. And I think historically, some of the QSRs with the most loyal customers were those breakfast-oriented chains, because people have that morning routine and commute where they go the same place every morning for their coffee or their bagel. And now what we're seeing is that the breakfast day part was hit much harder by the pandemic than any other day part. And now people are visiting more around lunchtime, but less in the morning. And so that's definitely something to keep an eye on over the next few months.
I think, just speaking as a consumer, that is spot on. I read the report, but still, it's just my habits now since roughly March, when we went to a quarantine. We just today had a recording for a podcast about 2 hours ago, which would have been 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock here. And I got my morning started with a webinar early in the morning. I did some, data entry, whatever stuff in the middle. And then I went to the gas station. I went to get lunch right around 12, which is different. I usually get gas on the way to work, but not having to go to work, not being forced to go to work, every single day like this in the office. It's changed my complete patterns, which has thrown my wife and my dog off. But still, it's spot on with what this is saying here. People are doing things based on need, not exactly by what they had to do in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think the other interesting thing to think about is the path to purchase, right? So one of the unique things that we're able to do at Foursquare is to see the places that people go before and after the gas station. And historically, maybe they were going on their way to work, or maybe, afterwards they were going to the movies or to a concert. And now, that path is really, to and from home, to and from the grocery store, hardware store. More of those essential categories is what we see picking up. The other, category that's interesting that we see picking up is outdoor activities. That's really popular these days. And so people are exploring their nearby surroundings via car rather than, driving mostly for their commute.
So I don't know if I'm oversimplifying. One of your other big takeaways was you can reach customers differently now as patterns change. So are there opportunities for when you talk to people that are different than when they used to be, instead of maybe hitting them with social media or emails or something at a certain point in the day that may evolve slightly because behaviors have changed, and they might be more likely to look at their phones during these certain hours? Are those types of things that you have pulled out recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. So marketers are really looking to our data to help make decisions when it comes to both segmentation as well as messaging, right? And so we're able to see who are the people who are out and about, who are going to enjoy outdoor dining, or shopping in clothing stores when they're open, and who are the people who are really still staying at home, and enabling marketers and brands to tailor their messaging to those different types of people with the right messaging at the right moment. And so we're able to advise these types of brands, hey, these are the types of people you should be reaching with messaging about takeout and delivery, or who are the people who are staying really close to home and you should reach them, people who live in proximity nearby to your locations. So that's definitely a top use case for the research that we've been doing on our end. And I think there are definitely new opportunities where maybe those didn't exist before. People working from home, maybe they're on their phones more in the middle of the day than they used to be. So I think, by category, we're seeing different brands adapt using this data.
I think also that the pandemic has brought out how we classify things may need to change. And I mean, in terms of our industry, we largely label stores as either rural or urban based on population of where that store is and the population where that store fits in. But whether you look at urban, rural, suburban, or some cut similar to that, that doesn't really address the way people are interacting now. And we're seeing in our industry, there's really three types of stores. There's the store that's off the highway, and that store is affected one way or another by the pandemic. Maybe seeing a little bit more in the way of truck traffic, and maybe seeing, at least in the summer, more consumers traveling short to mid distances instead of flying. Mm-hmm. Second type is the commuter store, and they're the one that's having the toughest time with breakfast and things like that because the commuting has been so significantly disrupted. The third one is a neighborhood store. That's the one that's kind of in the downtown-ish area or something like that you're more likely to drive by or frequent on a regular basis, whether or not you're commuting or not. So as an industry, we're looking at that, and we're looking at all this data and saying, whoa, it's a lot more complicated as a result of this pandemic. And that's, I think, where elements like what your data tracking is looking at can say, look, there's some real uncovered opportunities here for retailers to think entirely differently because we are in a different environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that first bucket is definitely really important to keep in mind as an opportunity. We definitely saw this as, the summer of the road trip, foot traffic, not only to gas stations, but also things like auto dealerships, auto repair shops, were really up compared to before the pandemic, and compared to last year even, where people are focusing their family vacations or visiting friends, really opting to drive rather than to fly. We've even seen, hotels recovering more quickly than airports because travel is still happening, but it is the summer of the road trip. And so those locations that are well positioned for that are in a good spot to continue to thrive. I think we've seen, certainly rural areas were less impacted than urban areas in terms of visitation to a wide variety of categories. We've also seen variation, though, across regions. So, those road trips are really big in the Midwest, as well as the Northeast. We've seen variation by age and by gender as well. So, men have been more out and about than women in many categories. And those younger audiences are out and about a bit more. So, as you mentioned, it's gotten a lot more complex given this new world.
And also looking at the lodging industry, motels have done a lot better than hotels.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the activities that people are doing when they're visiting places, it's less about, nightlife and concerts and things like that, casinos. And it's really all about the outdoor activities. We're seeing trails and parks, seeing a lot more people this year than in the past. And it'll be interesting to continue to keep an eye on that as the weather cools.
So this question is kind of to Jeff and Ariel. I know, Jeff, you're one of the hosts, but I think our retailers could really use both of your insights on this. One of the key takeaways from the report, it's noted, it says basically people are changing how and when they travel. It doesn't say people aren't traveling. It doesn't say people aren't moving. It doesn't say that people have stopped doing the things they did before. They're just doing it at different times. So I guess from your perspective, I'll start with you, Jeff, maybe. What does this tell retailers and how should they respond to this?
My thought is that it addresses impulses a little different. I think that when previously, before the pandemic, you kind of reacted to basically what your need state was. If you were hungry, you got something to eat. If you were thirsty, you got something to drink. You were already out and about. You were moving. Take that right-hand turn. It's coming up, or drive a little further for your favorite place. And I think what's changed a little bit is people are putting a little bit more thought into their stops. And we've heard a little bit from retailers that because traditionally with a convenience store, it's like you buy stuff for you or whoever's with you in the car. Mm-hmm. And that's the immediate consumption. And I think it's evolved a little bit where it's like, hey, do I need to bring something back for the folks at home? Do we need to bring back, you see more in the way of bulk items being purchased, ready to heat dinners, partially ready dinners, bulk items, things like that. And a little bit more center store cleaning items, things that obviously aren't consumed, but are used. So it's a little bit more, impulse is really important and immediate consumption, but how do we kind of plan things out as we go about our day? Not just like, hey, where'd so-and-so go? They're gone. But hey, I'm going out now. Do you need anything?
Exactly. That's a great takeaway. And what about you, Ariel? I think about with this information that you've provided to us and this great, again, this report, Mobility Reimagined, it touches on different types of categories of retail, but just for thinking of a convenience store owner or anyone really trying to reach their customers, one of the things it says here also as a takeaway is influence the places people go on their way from point A to point B. And also it says, take advantage of moments of receptivity. What does that mean in terms of any retailer and trying to connect with their consumer?
Yeah, I think that the whole idea behind location technology is that it really allows you to better understand consumers based on the places that they go in the physical world. And so that understanding then powers the ability to deliver more personalized, contextual messaging in the right moment to influence their behavior. And so we're seeing marketers leverage our data and insights to help do just that. I think that there is certainly opportunities to create really thoughtful, tailored, targeted strategies to those different types of consumers, as I mentioned earlier, to deliver the right message to them in the right moment. And so, those families who are going on a summer road trip, we can help identify, who are the young parents who are likely to be driving to visit their family over Thanksgiving. What is the messaging for that audience versus, who is picking up something on the way to a hike on a Saturday, and, showcasing the right products for that user, the right offers and promotions, to really drive better engagement ultimately, and then ultimately store traffic. And that's where we come in to help measure that as well. So I think, it'll be interesting to see how brands are able to keep their finger on the pulse of this changing landscape with data like ours in order to make sure that we are delivering the right messaging and not sort of lagging behind the shifts in consumer behavior.
And Donovan, I like your last question, so I'm going to turn it back on you guys for this one. I like the idea of asking both of us a question. The idea that we were just talking about is receptivity, and that leads to me thinking about routine. And we know that before the pandemic, routines where you stopped at the store in the morning, you stopped at the store in the evening, whatever on your routine. And routine, I mean, was what you did every day. And stores also made it routine by making it super easy. And now that more people are at home for an extended period or somewhat at home, they have different established routines. And those routines are hard to break. We've heard from different people it takes a week, it takes 2 weeks, it takes a month to break out of a habit and enter into a new routine. So Donovan, I'll start with you on this one. Is how do you see routines playing out, and how might a marketer attract you to break you out of the routine? And then we'll hear what the data says with the follow-up question.
I think the hardest thing to think is that anyone can change another person. So it's really going to be adapting to me, the consumer. And I say that just thinking about, we don't have children, my wife and I, so we eat at all kinds of hours. There's no real pattern to that. But now we have changed just a little bit in that we can't go to a restaurant and sit down in most places. So those restaurants of our favorite restaurants that actually adapted quicker and were offering, quick drive-by on your app, get the food, walk away and be back home within 10 minutes. Those are the places we continue to go to. Those that are just now beginning to turn that a corner, and I've kind of lost interest. So I think for me, it's not trying to break my routine, but actually get on my routine and address it the way I want to be told, or the way I want to shop, or the way I want to do anything. So always listening to your consumer or your customer is always my preference. And I love to hear if Ariel agrees with that or how that goes. But for me, selfishly, it sounds terrible. It's all about me.
Yeah, well, that's what the customer always decides. And
yes.
Ariel, so when you look at the data, do we see kind of gradual, because there's some people that adapt to a new pattern quickly and others much more slowly? Or is there just a spike during different times where people all of a sudden say, yeah, I'm going to change because I'm bored?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are seeing this entire pandemic as almost a great reset in consumer behavior, because people stayed home throughout, March and April and May, when many stores were closed or only offering restaurants only offering delivery, things like that. That muscle memory of consumption was sort of lost, and so as people were showing us that they were really eager to get back out and about and start moving around, there was this big opportunity, and still is this big opportunity, for brands to break those routines and influence that behavior. So if it's your favorite local restaurant is still closed, or they're only doing takeout, maybe there's another restaurant down the street that has an outdoor patio that's able to win that share of visits. Or the same way, a convenience store, maybe it was, you would always go to the place that was right by your office. And now that you're not going into the office, you're going to find a convenience store closer to your home to fill up. And so I think, we see this as a really great time and opportunity to take advantage of those, that reset in routine.
And it is because that there are some real challenges with segments of the economy, unemployment and things like that. But for those who have continued with their jobs, spending, at least for a while, was decreased because there was virtually no traveling, no spending, no going out. And so I absolutely agree that there are opportunities out there, because the spending has been lower for a few months, and it's just figuring out what people want and being in their mindset. And like Donovan said, it's you got to figure out what they want, not what you want them to want. And it's a slight variation of words, but were there any real surprises when your team got together and looked at this report that stood out compared to what you expected to find?
Yeah, I think one area that I was a little bit surprised was that the rideshare recovered so quickly. While it's not the most isolated form, I suppose it is a more isolated form than taking the train or the bus. So that was one area that I was a bit surprised at, that we were able to uncover in partnership with Aptopia. I think in terms of our data, it was also interesting to see that auto dealerships and auto shops recovered so quickly. We're actually able to survey the people who are visiting those shops, though, and see that a lot of them are going in for maintenance and service and repairs, and less so to buy a new vehicle. But that's interesting because people are, getting more use out of their cars. They need to make sure that they're in good condition. So definitely just further evidence of people being on the road, but something that we might not have expected to see at first glance.
Man, so, there's so much that I learned from this report. And the thing I like about it the most is it's very easy to read. And I don't want to say just because it has pictures, but it's simplified. It does have charts, but it also has things that are easy for anyone to review and kind of pick up some points that they could add to their method of doing business. So again, the report is called Mobility Reimagined. But Ariel, where can our retailers or listeners find more about Foursquare and Aptopia, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're interested in accessing more of our research, we've also been helping many partners with custom research tailored to their business needs. You can reach us at hi@foursquare.com. And then our website, enterprise.foursquare.com, has some excellent resources. We have a blog there where we post lots of different research. And as I mentioned, our Amazon data exchange page as well has lots of great data sets for analysis.
And just to confirm, it was the email hi, as in informal hello, hi, at foursquare.com.
Correct.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Ariel, for making yourself available for our audience. I'm sure they're going to get a lot out of this. The details you and Jeff both were able to provide is something that every retailer, every listener should really pay attention to. And again, coming back to that same thing of you've got to really know what your customer wants and where they are and when they're going to get there and be ready to meet them. So thank you, Ariel. And we look forward to seeing more from Foursquare and more of your reports in the future.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for listening to Convenience Matters.
You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half of the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.